Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be hailing from. This is Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents. I'm your host, Eric the IT Guy Hendricks, and joining me is the illustrious, the amazing Mr. Brian Smith.
Hey Eric, how you doing today?
Honestly, I'm exhausted, but for very, very good reason. In case you haven't seen, as of today, as of this morning, RHEL 9.4 is out in the wild. RHEL 8.10 will be out in the coming days, but RHEL 9.4 is out there. It's in a repository or an ISO near you. So go check out the release notes. We'll have a live stream on this channel coming up next week's summit. Oh my gosh, there's so much going on. No wonder I'm tired. So we have Summit next week, and then the week after, we'll have a live stream on this channel. Grab the product updates and add that to your calendar. What other while we're on the topic, Brian? I don't know if you noticed, but up there yonder, there's a QR code because the conversation doesn't stop when the stream stops. We've got a Discord server. We've got something like 80 some odd people in there right now, and it's growing every day. So if you want to continue the conversation, make sure to join us on our Discord server. Would love to engage with you all there. But other than that, Brian, what are we talking about today? I got so excited about everything else. What are we doing?
Yeah, one of my favorite topics actually. We're going to be talking about Red Hat Satellite today and all the amazing things you can do with it.
I love Red Hat Satellite, at least at least the way it is now, because back in the day, like in the Satellite 5.x timeframe, was when I was an administrator, and those were dark days. We don't talk about those days, but really, really excited. So, with that said, why don't we bring in our guest? We've got Pete Sagat joining us today. Welcome to the show, Pete.
Hey, you guys. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, what you do, and then something you do for fun.
Ooh, something for fun. Okay. I'm Pete Saget. I'm a senior technical account manager here with Red Hat, supporting the FSI teams. And this is my second tour of duty, as you could say, at Red Hat. I've been here cumulatively for about 10 years now, all of them pretty much in the TAM space. So, yeah. Um, let's see here. What do I do for fun? Yikes. Other than working for Red Hat. Yeah, I like to try and convince my three kids that computers are cool and fun, and that they should join me in doing them. Because I think as a parent, right, you want them to kind of take after you, and or at least one of them, right? So I like spending time with my kids and playing games with them, and just doing fun science stuff, and sometimes that revolves around computers. So.
Very cool. Well, Pete. Let's start by just covering for anyone watching who's not familiar with Satellite, just at a high level, what is Red Hat Satellite and what can it do?
Yeah, Red Hat Satellite. Red Hat Satellite's a really cool tool. So as Eric kind of alluded to a little bit earlier here, previous versions of Satellite. I mean, I went back personally. I've been using it since 4 and 5. It's obviously changed quite a bit with 6. 6 was a complete rewrite, right? And whereas 4 and 5 were based on the upstream spacewalk. 6 is pretty much a collection of individual upstream tools that are really Red Hat focused, right? For our customers, and the main component of Satellite that I like. Or most of our customers use is the patching and lifecycle component, the content procurement. There's a whole lot of other features within Satellite, and the main thing that we're going to talk about today is the lifecycle portion and the content management portion. But it's more than that. It's grown to be a whole organizational management tool.
Very cool. And so you mentioned older versions of Satellite, like Satellite 4 and 5. So at this point, those are no longer supported, right? And people should be on Satellite 6. Is that right?
Oh yeah. I mean, you can. I'm sure there's some holdouts there, right? But the nice thing about Satellite is, like I said, it's a group of upstream projects. So, I know of customers that use Satellite, and then they have a separate upstream environment like Foreman for doing certain things. But yeah, Satellite 6 has been around now for quite a while. It's gotten very mature. It's been nice to see it kind of grow from the 6.0 version that it used to be. We had some growing pains, like anything when it comes to a complete rewrite of the product. But it's become very, very verbose, and very powerful tool for most sysadmins.
And we were talking about moving to Satellite 6, and I can think of no better reason than right now to do so, because as of, about a week ago, maybe 5 days ago at the time of recording, Satellite 6.15 was just released, and kind of skimming through some of the highlights. Looks like just a lot more stability, a lot more reliability coming in this release. There's a few new reports. There's a few UI changes, some workflow changes to make it a little bit easier to interact with some of the wizards. So all in all, very, very stability focused release, which should make it more performant, a little bit more reliable. And so I'm just really excited to see the satellite engineering team kind of taking this time to focus on cleaning house instead of always trying to produce something new or introduce breaking changes.
Yeah, and let's not forget about the most important change that came with 6.15, which is the UI change when it comes to the flyout menu, right? I think a lot of us, if you've been using Satellite 6 for a while, I know we've made some changes where the bar was at the top, and you could click on it, had that fold out, and then it moved to the left-hand side, and then for me and for a lot of people, it's kind of been a bit of a frustration, right? When we click somewhere close to that menu, it slides out and then it stays there for a little bit without the ability to kind of click and hide it away. So 6.15, that's a new feature that I really, really like. So
That might be something good to actually show people. Do you have 6.15?
you got me there, Brian. Our labs, we haven't updated them here to 6.15 yet.
Okay.
So
maybe next time. Okay.
I know.
Called him out on air.
We'll have a whole session on just that menu. I mean, I'm pretty excited about it, but much like most of our viewers and our customers, right? We can't just be slapping new updates into production. We've got to wait for some downtime. But yes, he got me.
The good news is, though, never fear, Brian. The good news is that coming up this summer, I don't know when and I don't know what time, but coming up this summer, we are planning a satellite mini-series. So we're looking at about 6 episodes or so that'll take you from I installed this thing, now what do I do with it, to hopefully having some sort of a good understanding of how some of the different tools work together.
Right. Well, let's talk, Pete, a little bit more about some of the other use cases. You mentioned, patch management, lifecycle management, stuff like that. What are some of the other common use cases that people are using satellite for?
Yeah, so one of the other big use cases that our customers are using it for is for provisioning. So much like previous versions of Satellite way back when, doing kickstart builds right off the Satellite servers is pretty common. From real basic setups, just kick it and then manually configure it to using all the provisioning tools that are in there, and again, I know you guys talk about a summer series on Satellite. You could basically do a whole summer on just the provisioning portion of Satellite, because we, can do things from kickstarts to pixie boots. We can configure Satellite to essentially be your DHCP and DNS manager. We can tie into compute resources like VMware and provision systems from there. We can do discovery where the systems get built up and we get them automatically imported into Satellite and then build based on some templates that we establish. So templates is a whole other thing we could probably spend a lot of time on. And I could probably briefly go into those in a little while here as we do kind of a full overview. But the templates are basically just reusable code. They're Ruby ERB templates, and you can basically kind of mix and dice them up however you want to configure your system, from partitioning to packages that you want to install or user creation, all that kind of good stuff. Some other stuff, and one that I really like. I think it's awesome. I think it's a great 1-2 punch with RHEL as an offering. Is Insights. Insights came out. Trying to think, it's been a while now, guys. I want to say like it's been like 5 years that Insights has been out, but that doesn't. It feels like it's been less than that. But Insights is Red Hat Insights is an integration within Satellite now, where we can do remediation on either patches or CVEs. If for those that don't know what Insights is basically a tool that allows us to do analysis on our systems or your systems and determine if there's any performance mismatches based on things that you may have installed, or if there's a security risk with how you have something configured. It's a very, very, very cool tool. It's one of the coolest tools I think that we have here at Red Hat. Sorry about any of the other product teams that are out there. I just really love Insights, because I think it's, you get it with the RHEL entitlement, right? And it's such a great value add. But now that we have it tied in through Satellite, is even greater value, because you don't have to go necessarily through the Cloud Console to push those remediations. Another area that customers will use Satellite is the compliance feature. So you can do OpenSCAP things and set baselines, download the policies and apply them to host groups or host collections, and see exactly if a system is out of that standard. And then not so much nowadays, especially with the prevalence of things like Ansible, but remote execution obviously has its part within Satellite. When we just want to apply a RAT or apply a quick patch, maybe it's the next Heartbleed or whatever, we can do some remote execution right through Satellite itself. So yeah.
Very cool. And we did have a question about what version of RHEL that you can run Satellite 6.15 on. And my understanding is that Satellite 6.15 will only run on top of RHEL 8 currently. And one thing to keep in mind, though, is it can manage, other versions of RHEL. So you can manage, obviously RHEL 7, RHEL 8, and RHEL 9 with that. But right now with Satellite 6.15, my understanding is that it does only run on RHEL 8 currently.
Yeah, that would be correct.
Well,
Yep.
RHEL 9 as a satellite operating system is still on the roadmap. I don't know that we've heard any idea of when that might be coming, but I'm sure it's in the works by now. We are up to RHEL 9.4. So you've got me excited about some of the UI changes, because we all live within our tools all day, every day. So why don't we dive in, and how about you give us a quick tour?
Yeah, let's take a look at kind of the overview of Satellite. When we log in here, this is kind of just your opening pane. The one thing that I'll point out here is, and again, this is going to be because we want to obviously get into the meat and potatoes of the live stream here when it comes to lifecycle management and content views. But the one thing that I want to point out here, especially when it comes to Satellite, is that we're pulling in, typically for content management, we're pulling in very large repositories and a lot of packages. And this tasks portion here is a good thing to know, because when we pull this up, you'll see all your running tasks, and you can see we were doing some housekeeping, or I should say I was doing some housekeeping the last couple days here. But you can see all the repositories that are being synced, and the status and stop states. And occasionally, no product's perfect, right? But occasionally, repositories will get hung up, or something will get kind of messed up, and you'll have to kind of cancel these out. But it's a good area to go when things are kind of backing up or aren't working as you would suspect. But just something to keep in mind here. The main tab that I think a lot of people are going to live in terms of satellite is going to be the content tab here. And this is kind of where we all get started. So from a high level, really, we start with subscriptions, and your subscriptions are basically what you're allowed to use, allowed to pull from the Red Hat CDN. And since I work for Red Hat, we've got this fun little employee SKU, which basically gives us everything underneath the sun. Although you think you want that, but if you actually use that SKU, you'll find out that it's a deluge of a ton of products. So try to find and work, especially if you're not registering a system directly to satellite. Let's just say, pulling down your available repositories, disabling them, and then going one through one to find what you want can be a little bit of a hassle. But the employee SKU, when we go through the repositories, you'll see just a ton of repositories, and that's because of it. But these subscriptions get pulled through from your manifest. And the one thing that I really like, and we added this relatively early on with satellite, was the ability to kind of refresh your manifest if you made changes to it directly within this pane here, which is really nice. Another thing that I want to point out is this simple content access. And I think for those of you that have been with Satellite 6 for a while now, this is a godsend. The SCA basically allows you to, it's a soft limit on your entitlements, and it can be a blessing or a curse depending on which side of the checkbook you're on, right? But SCA basically, it used to be where if you wanted to use an entitlement on a box, you'd have to attach the entitlements to the activation key. And then let's say you only had 100 entitlements, RHEL entitlements, and you wanted to push to 101, but you didn't realize you were at the limit, you were pretty much shut down. And then you'd have to go back and you'd have to find out, okay, who's using my entitlements and all this other kind of fun stuff that us sysadmins have to spend our time on. SCA pretty much does away with that. It's pretty much a, hey, we'll let you use what you want to use, but eventually you'll kind of have to pay up. So that's where the curse kind of comes, depending on where you're looking. So you could very easily run into a case where next thing you know, you've got hundreds more systems deployed than you thought you had because your dev teams are in there or whatever. So I like it that it doesn't stop you from doing what you need to do on a day-to-day. But you do need to keep track on it. And I had this tab up here just for this very reason. Subscription watch is something that we've also tied into this. And this is on console.redhat.com. And you can kind of see all the subscriptions that you're using, so you can kind of keep track of it. So we're giving you the tools and the information to make informed decisions in your guys' environments and making sure that you're not using yes, free at last, exactly, the SCA. But it will allow you to go far over as much as you want. We'll let you take it right to the cliff. But just something to be mindful there.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in. We also recently had Rich Dorito on the show to talk all about simple content access, subscription watch, all the amazing functionality there. So if you want more info on that, definitely go back and watch that previous episode we had with him.
Read my mind. I was looking for the link as we were talking.
I might go back and watch that because Rich is I've known Rich since I've been here for 10 years, and that guy's mastermind when it comes to satellite. So
yeah, he also talked about how I think it's Q3. Brian, correct me. But I think Q3 simple content access will be on by default, or will be on permanently. So right now it's sort of opt-in, but later on this year you'll be required to use simple content access.
Yeah, that's good to know. Like I said, SCA has been a big boon for our customers. When having to play the entitlement game, so to speak. So, your manifest will pretty much control exactly what you have access to, the products that you can see, which ties us directly back into this little product section here. And these products are basically bundles little bundles that determine which repositories you now have access to based on the entitlements in your manifest. A couple things to share here really quick. We've got we've got the RHEL for x86-64. We've got the EOS, which allows us to basically stay put on a version of RHEL for once it's gone to the next minor version. Another thing to keep in mind here is you may see the question may be, hey, why do I have this and why do I have this? It's a good question. You can look at just this one. This one will basically be up to 7. This one right here, this x86-64 will be 8 and 9. Just as a heads up there that there's a delineation there. I don't know why. I don't know if you guys can share on that, but I think it was just switching over to when we did app streams. When we put everything out to the base OS and the app stream for modules in RHEL 8, I think that's when they made that shift in the naming. The other thing that we have here is products is not just something that you'll get from the manifest. If like I added this just for the demo purposes, we've got EPEL 8. So if we wanted EPEL and all those extra packages, those aren't coming from our manifest that we imported. This is basically creating a product, configuring it as a repository, an RPM repository, and then adding the GPG key in there. And so you can kind of see the repositories and all the packages that are in there that are provided by that product. Speaking of which, when we create when you want, we're not limited to just Red Hat products themselves. I mean, you can add your own custom repositories, and that's what makes the lifecycle and the content view so useful for our customers, is that we can do your own repositories for your own applications. So if you're writing your own RPMs, and it doesn't just have to be an RPM either, we can do the Puppet modules and other things like that. But you can pull in from any repository that you want and use that within your lifecycle environments and your content views. So, content credentials, that's kind of where we establish for you won't have to do this for any of the Red Hat provided stuff, but like for the EPEL, you can see here we got, nobody look. I'm kidding. The GPG key here for EPEL, and you can see kind of the products that are established. It's super easy to do this kind of stuff. There's great documentation. That's one of the really nice things on the portal, is there's just a ton of good satellite documentation that goes over a lot of this stuff in much more depth. Then the other thing is these the sync plans and sync status. So way back on satellite 4 and 5, you had the same sync plans and sync status. And this is kind of similar. So you might be doing, the nice thing is with when we get into life cycles, life cycles basically prevent, or I shouldn't say prevent, but they allow you to segment your environments and only show content to those environments that you want to when you want to, which is really important, because if you just have your systems registered to RHN and you haven't done any configuration to them, when new packages get put to those repositories and somebody runs an update, a Yum update or a DNF update to the system, you're pulling the latest greatest, whatever it's registered to. With the lifecycle environments, we can curtail that and prune and decide when that kind of stuff happens. So even if somebody runs a DNF update, if there's no new packages that have been pushed since the last time you've done the patching, you're not going to have any. It's just going to say nothing to do, right? So the sync plans, you might have. I know from my experience as a systems engineer for 10 years, when we did patching, we would pull packages in a week before we would do test. And then just in the off chance somebody ran a DNF update, or, well, it wasn't DNF at the time, but a Yum update or up to date. And so, we would try and prevent that. With satellite 6, we can pull in the packages on a daily basis and not worry about systems getting them that they shouldn't get them. That being said, I'll show you this. There's there's a content view, a default organizational view, which is the library. The library holds everything, so it's basically just like being registered to the Red Hat network. But when you do the sync, here, you can configure it to do it, every day or every night at 2 a.m. whatever. I think we do this on a weekly basis here for some of our stuff. Moving on here to the sync status, we can quickly see all the repositories that we have access to, and then the latest state of them. This thing loading?
And just to jump in here too,
Yeah, go ahead.
One really cool thing that I like about Satellite is you have a couple of options when you're syncing a repository, right? Like a lot of these repositories are quite large, like the RHEL, AppStream repository, and you're probably only using a limited amount of that. You're probably not using every RPM in there. So when you sync a repository, you can choose, do I want to do an immediate sync and sync everything in that repository? Or do I want to do an on-demand where it's only going to sync the metadata and then sync the repository, the actual packages as needed, on demand. So it can be a big time saver and space saver if you're not going to be using every package in there. So you have a couple of options you can choose from there.
Yeah, 100%. That's a good point to make. When you're configuring the repositories, you can choose like Brian said, you can do on demand, or you can just pull everything, right? And some of these repositories have 40,000 packages in them, and so it can take a while to do that initial sync. The other thing that we could probably tie into that, and you guys will probably bring this up maybe in the summer series, but like capsules and moving the content closer to where the systems might live. So you might have, systems out in AWS. You've got a capsule out there that talks back to the satellite, your production satellite server, but you don't need all the repositories out in your capsule. You may only need a few. They may be big ones, and you can do what they call a lazy sync, which is basically don't sync anything, sync the metadata, and when a client asks for the new update on HTTP or Nginx or whatever, it will go out and pull that for you, and then you're limiting that, that transfer. So here's the all the repositories here, and we can kind of see the repositories that we've got access to. These will be tied directly to. Excuse me. Did I skip over Red Hat repositories, by the way? I think I didn't I, guys? I mean, that was a pretty obvious one. I think we skipped over it.
We kind of mentioned it in passing.
Okay, we'll mention it in passing. All right, so all these get pulled from Red Hat repositories. So you know what? I'm going to go back because I just realized I just completely skipped over Red Hat repositories. There's too many awesome options within Satellite that it's hard to keep track. These basically are pulled from the products that we talked about earlier. And so if you've got entitlements for RHEL, well, they're going to show up in here. The one thing that I really like, they eventually added this in, was this recommended repositories. You can click this on and it will show you the most used repositories that you want. So like Ansible Engine 2.9 for 7. You can see all the stuff that we've enabled here on the right-hand side. I'm going to get to something newer other than 6, although I feel like there's some people out there that are still on 6. You know who you are, but as long as no one comes out with AS4. Let's see here. Yeah, so here's a good example. So we're pulling in a whole bunch of different of the 8 versions. So one thing I want people to be aware of is that this base OS RPMs 8 channel is actually linked to whatever the latest minor release of RHEL is. And so right now that's 8.9. This will come into play in a little bit when we talk about content views and the difference between like your development and your production environment. Excuse me. You can pull in, some customers are like, I'm staying on 8.6 for as long as I can stay on 8.6, and then I'm going to swing in those EOS packages and stay there as long as I can stay for that time being. And so you'd pull down the individual minor releases too. And that might be more pertinent to your production environments. But all these repositories are basically then shifted over to and show up underneath your sync status. And like I said, you can schedule this however you want, whenever you want. And man, that it's taking a little bit to load this morning. Come on. There we go. Okay. So we can see we've got our extended update support for a whole bunch of different minor versions of RHEL here, JBoss, Satellite Enterprise Linux, and then you can choose to sync only certain ones if you want. You don't need to sync them all. Obviously, if I would let this rip, it would it would take a little while and probably slow down the UI quite a bit. So I kind of want to stagger them, especially with the amount of content that we're pulling in. And really, depending upon your environment, will determine obviously what you're all using. Here's our EPEL that we created, or I created earlier, just sort of those extra packages you can see here. So it's just not the Red Hat product. So briefly moving on here, because I know we're getting along on just the UI, but the other section is hosts, and really where you're going to live here is this content host, because the content hosts are basically all your hosts that are registered to Satellite and are getting content, depending on their lifecycle environment. You can see all these systems that are registered. You can see their environment that they live in currently, and their base content view, and the security, bug fix enhancements, and package updates that are available to each system. All this information is queryable through the API. Which is great. So you don't have to just come in here and do it. You can pull this information out at your leisure. Going through here, we talked a little bit about the provisioning and the templates. There's a whole bunch in here, and again, we're just not going to have time to cover it. But within the provisioning, you would set up, different hardware that you're deploying on, the different installation media that you might be using. So you might have the 9.4 ISOs, and then the operating systems that you're creating with, and within the operating systems, how you're partitioning the disk, the packages that are being installed, all that kind of stuff. I talked a little bit about the Ruby templates that we have in here. This is where we'd set up those provisioning, partition, and sync templates that we would use for building systems. The compliance portion, like OpenSCAP, stuff will be in here. Your policies, I don't think there's anything. There might be one or two that are in here, but your policies, you just import, upload a new compliance policy, and then can run it against a host collection, to get the report there. Configure is the same thing here. Configuring for host groups are more for the provisioning things and the discovery rules as well. We do have Ansible tie-ins, and that could be a whole other discussion. Your inventory upload and your insights is, I'm just going to quickly get on this one. We don't have a lot. I don't have good dummy data to show, recommendations that would come up. And if we have time, I can always go out to the console and get some more information in here. But this is where you'd get your recommendations on for Red Hat Insights. And you can, the nice thing is that now with the new registration process that we've added in a little while ago, we can get Insights client installed automatically on the client itself when we register, and then it will basically use the satellite server as its proxy rather than having to go directly out. So infrastructure is the same thing. So this is kind of where we do things for the DNS and DHCP, creating new subnets and networks for doing new deployments. You don't have to use satellites DHCP or DNS. You can tie in, was it Bluecat or Bluecoat? Some third-party IP management system, but that's where all this kind of stuff goes. So that's kind of the high-level rundown. I wanted to get through all the content. There's just a lot just under content itself. I mean, we've been on that for maybe 20 minutes at this point, and we barely scratched the surface. So there's a ton of information there. But guys, did you want to add anything before we move to the lifecycle stuff?
No, I think that was a great overview. Eric, do you have any other?
Not really on this side. I mean, it just goes to show that package management is Satellite's bread and butter, and there's just so much to cover. There's so much to talk about. I'm not sure how we're even going to put a dent in satellite, even with a 6-episode miniseries, much less an hour-long live stream today. But one of the problems that we see users having satellite to fix most often is not just to have all these packages available. There's some conversation going on in the chat about using satellite to pull down packages on an as-needed basis, and so that way you're not downloading 40,000 packages that you may only use 1,200 of, and and that's where satellite really comes into play. But it goes a step beyond that. You can actually create these views for lifecycle environments. So a lot of organizations in my days, there's dev, there was test, some sort of QA or staging environment, production. Then you'd end up with other environments like DR, or maybe you had a warm site or something where things were up and running, but you didn't have the DNS pointed that direction. So being able to classify systems into different stages of their life cycle really adds a lot of power to what satellite does, and that's what we want to lean into next.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it makes, with Linux, there's 50 different ways to do things, right? I mean, and if you wanted to do it yourself, I swear I've had customers that are like, we want to do it the difficult way because it's a challenge, and God bless them. I'm kind of that way. Like, I like the challenge. I want to see if I can do it, even though I'm basically reinventing the wheel, right? But then there's other things like satellite that will help you do some of these things without having to reinvent the wheel and just make your lives easier. I know, as a past sys engineer, it's like you only had so many hours in the day, and most of it was taken up by dealing with either complaints or frustrations from users because the box is slow and they want more memory, right? Those kinds of things. So let's get into the kind of the meat and potatoes of the live stream here today, which is the lifecycle environments. And this is where a lot of us will live. Like I said, lifecycle environments and these lifecycle environment paths are basically ways to curtail that chaos, that the packaging chaos. You can create as many of these as you want, although that's not a challenge. That's just there's no hard, constraints around it. Well, I'm sure there is theoretically, because I'm sure somebody's going to post it in the chat. You can only do 1,024 or whatever it is. But, you can have multiple different environments for different application life cycles and system life cycles. So you're not limited to just what you see here. As I alluded to earlier, you have this library, and this is kind of the default organizational view that people are subscribed to by default. Using the word in the definition is always helpful. But this library here that you see is basically has everything. So it's got all your Yum repositories, all the packages, errata, module streams, all that kind of stuff. That's where things are going to live by default. Now, everything moves off the library itself when we create a new environment. And you'll kind of see that here. But, this is one that we had established previously for our own TAMs within our lab. And this kind of resembles most common environments that customers will have. You've got a dev, and you've got a QA, and a stress, and then a prod. I set up one that was separate, but you can add a new environment off this. So if you wanted to do like, the prior environment is production, you wanted to do super production, you can certainly do that, and you can kind of interject it wherever in there, and you can have it as long as you want. And if you wanted to create another environmental path, it's exactly what you would do here. You would just create a new one. It would plop down here, and then you can use that. And you'll see where all these kind of show up when we do the content views and the activation keys, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But your lifecycle environment paths really determine what content they're going to get, what content views we assign to them. So, for example, your development environment will have vastly different repositories than your superprod. Your superprod may be stuck on a more stable version of RHEL. It may be on 8.6 EUS at this point, okay? And your development may be on 8.9. And as the application matures and goes through its life, you will promote those to where your super prod or production, whatever you have, will now be 8.9 or 8.99 US, and your development environment may now be provided 9.4 packages. So, and anything in between. And the way that we kind of carve up the repositories and what kind of content we want to serve up to the systems in them is in your content views here. So we've got content views here, and we can see some content views that I already created. And one typical one that you may have is let's see here, this CVOS RHEL 8 one that I've got created. And you can see on the right hand side, you can see its latest version, and you can see the environment that says actually in. So if you go here and we can look at the repositories that have been assigned to them, you can see the different versions, and things change as we add more packages as they go, but we can see the repositories that are added in there. And we can see that these, we're using the supplementary and the base 8. Now, as I said earlier, the base 8 is basically going to be a link to whatever the latest greatest is for the RHEL minor version that you're in. So for this case, it's going to be linked to 8.9. So it's going to have everything for 8.9 and back in there, which is why you've got 36,241 RPM packages. Let me step out of here. And if you wanted to add, make changes to this, you could simply go in here and choose another repository and click add the repository. Now, the important thing to remember is unless you click this publish new version, you are not going to be able to see it in your environment, even if it's in that environment that you promoted to. So even if this was a previous version in, let's say, development, if you don't publish a new version, the systems that are in that lifecycle environment are never going to see it. This little promote button is that when we get to environment, if we want to push this to dev or any other environment, that's how we would do it. But that's something to keep in mind there. So let's go back to here. So if we want to use these content views and we want to apply the repositories to a specific system, okay, how do we do that? Well, we do that with activation keys. And I'm going to create a quick activation key where we're going to register it to a system that doesn't have any repositories at this point. The reason why I've created the content views ahead of time is sometimes with the size of the repositories, they can take a little while, and rather than having a couple minutes of dead air and just talking about certain things, I wanted to have them ready for you guys. So I'm going to create this. This is going to be for dev. All right. And I like to start things off with a naming convention. Oh, there's that menu we were talking about earlier. And you can see your different environments, and I want this to be in development. And then when we go to development, we can see only a certain amount of content views because they've been published and promoted to just that environment. If I go to production, I'm only going to see this content view. So just as a heads up, you're only going to see what you've actually published or promoted to. So we want to use this one. We want to use the OS to base OS. Click save here. This will create it real quickly for us. We can do a bunch of different stuff here. The release version you can leave separate, but this is a gotcha kind of moment. If you don't have this set correctly, or you start, kind of messing with it, and you have a content view that's not pushing, a content view that's not, it doesn't match up with your release flag, you're going to get a 404 when you try and do your repository sync. So for this, I just leave it on 8. You can leave it blank. It makes no difference there. We can see the content view that the systems are going to be registered to. Now, for those of you that have been around for a long time, this was typically how we used to register systems, and you still can. You'd have to pull down the Catello CA consumer package manually, and there's some other manual steps. But we did add some new stuff within here, and before I get out of this activation key, I just want to show the repository sets. Because there is a slight gotcha here as well. I'm going to click this to limit to the environment for the environment that it's in. But you'll notice that if it's not one of these base repositories, it's going to disable it by default, and we'll have to do an override action. And I believe that came in within the last few minor versions of Satellite, but we'll have to override to enable here for it to show up, or else you're going to end up being like, where is my third repository? So just something to keep in mind there. If we want to attach this activation key to a content host and register it, we're going to go over here to host and click register host. And this gives us a whole lot more options than we used to have, outside of just doing it kind of the old version. And keep in mind, the older versions are deprecated at this point. You can still do it, but at some point they will go away. But we can do a lot more things. We can do organizational location specifications. We can do enabling, setting up the SSH keys for remote execution, as well as setting up insights, which is very, very cool. I'm going to click no just to speed this along here. And we can do a whole bunch of other stuff. If you're doing automation, you're going to want to click this to unlimited, because for now, the token life is only going to last for 4 hours. The activation key, we're going to choose the activation key that we just created, which is this AK_dev_Sagat. The lifecycle environment, I don't need to specify because I'm using the activation key. The activation key pretty much does the configuration for the host. It tells us, the content view that we're going to be in, the lifecycle that we're going to be in, and in turn, the repositories and the content that we're getting. I'm going to do a force on here, and then I'm going to do insecure, just because it's going to fail out because we don't have the certificate installed here. But I'm going to copy this here. I'm going to go to a console real quick, trying to be mindful of time for everybody. This is just a base, I think this is base 8.8 or 8.9 system that I have. And really, you can see the old kind of way that's in here, that we used to with the subscription manager register, but you've got your activation key that we're going to use, and force, and a few of the other options. And we're going to run this registration, and assuming I didn't break something earlier, it should go all as planned. While that's running, I am wondering if I want to go back to it. If it's, oh no, okay, it's running pretty quick, guys. So,
and while we're waiting for this to complete, there was a comment from William about automating this process of promoting content views, et cetera. So just want to bring up, we do have a satellite Ansible collection for managing a lot of aspects of satellites. That's a really good option to be able to automate a lot of these processes related to content views and whatnot.
Yeah,
100%.
100%.
That's the beautiful thing about this is you can kind of you can be so descriptive about how your environment looks that, especially with things like your dev environment, you can have that expectation set with your developers that, hey, dev every Sunday at 2 a.m. is going to get the latest patches. So just beware and try not to leave your work open over the weekends. But then you can also kind of pre-stage a lot of those changes. If for instance, you want to prepare for a patching window, you can go ahead and pre-populate a lot of those packages for production ahead of time, so that you can, when the maintenance window opens, you can bring down all your workloads, and then just go in and start deploying packages through satellite, or even schedule that, which makes it really, really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish I had time to talk about the Ansible portion too, but I mean, even just doing this, we're kind of running short on time. A lot of people wonder, there's discussions, and this is obviously where TAMs come in, for those that maybe don't have TAMs on their accounts. We kind of give technical guidance and advisory status to our customers in terms of some of these things, and one of the areas is like content views. Should I have one large content view? Should I have multiple content views that are broken out? There's pluses and minuses to those. A lot of that we have documented on the portal, and we kind of give a breakdown as to why you'd want a really big one, why you'd want it to be broken out. Generally, you don't want to have to be managing more cattle, so to speak, which is like content views and activation keys. So sometimes keeping it really simple is easier, but keeping in mind that if you have a really large content view, it's gonna take longer to publish because you've got to go through all those changes. Okay, perfect. So now we're registered here, and we can quickly do subscription manager status, and SCA is reporting that it doesn't need an entitlement, and I want to see. All right, so we do a subscription manager identity, and we can see here that the name of the system, the org name, the org ID that it's in, and then more pertinently, we've got the environment name. And see, we can see that it's in the development lifecycle, and it's using this content view. So we know exactly where its content is coming from. There's no guesswork. And if we do a yum repo list, and of course my typing skills go down once people start watching. It's kind of like Schrodinger's cat. We can see the repositories that are getting pulled. So it's pulling its initial metadata, just like you would when you were just registering to RHN, and we can see all the packages here, including the supplementary RPMs that we just did the override on. And if we do an up-to-date or DNF up-to-date rather, you'll see that it'll now be able to pull down the packages and everything is hunky-dory, which we're not going to do because I think everybody has seen a update screen before. So we're going to.
I don't think I have.
No, I mean, we can run it. If you want to stay after class, we can certainly do it. The other thing that I wanted to really briefly talk about here is composite content views. Keeping in mind, again, we've only got about 9 minutes here, but composite content views are because you can only have one content view assigned to an activation key and to the host itself. So how do we get, let's just say, rather than having one really big content view, we kind of break it out and have smaller content views that are reusable in certain environments, right? So if we are building on 8.6 or 8.8 in development, but we also use 8.6 or 8.8 in production, we can create just a regular CV, like this CV OS RHEL 8.6, and we can add it to a composite content view. And composite content views are basically just a container for other content views. And here, let's see here. This is the one that I created, and you can kind of see the nomenclature that I used for doing this. I like to have this what it is in front of everything. It keeps it nice and tidy. But you can see the content views that we're using, and we can make changes individually to these content views, and then when a change is made to one of these content views, it'll auto update or auto publish the changes to the composite content view that it's in. But here we wanted, for dev, we've got our base 08, which a lot of environments may use, but then because it's dev, we wanted to add the EPEL repositories, and because it's the application, maybe we're using, the data path RPMs. And then that way we can assign multiple content views to it. So if we go over to here and we create a new activation key, and we say activation key dev, let's see here. Let's do CV, and I want this to be in development. And you can see the composite content view that we created, and it's going to be the exact same process. We create the new one, and then we can use this content view to register against another host. So you can have, you can break it out into your base RHEL. You can break it out into, your application content view. So if you had a third-party custom repository that you were using for your own development work, you'd have a content view for that. and so on and so forth. And then that way you can kind of fine tune and pick and choose what you're using. The other thing that we didn't really get into, and I want to touch real briefly on, are filters. Filters, we're doing some really basic stuff with the content views, but filters are really where we get really get into the nitty gritty. We can create content, or we can create filters on our content views based on things like RPM or package group or errata by date range. So if you do patching by, let's say, monthly, and you want everything from the first day after you last patched to 30 days from now and nothing more, you can create that filter and just do an include, and it will exclude everything else. Or if there's a problem package, let's say you really don't like HTTP and you're a big Nginx fan, you can filter out and limit HTTP and put Nginx in, and promote that through your guys' environment and make changes based on that. And it doesn't just have to be on package groups or RPMs. One thing is that you saw all the packages that are in those repositories. If you just want to do it on the basic server package group, you can just do that and limit everything else. There's some other gotchas in terms of like filters on making sure when you exclude everything, I think it's if you exclude everything, it's not going to do the dependency checks. So then you've got to kind of really do a lot of testing and things like that. But there's a lot of power within the filter out Emacs. Yes. There's a lot of filter or power in the filters.
Yeah, and just an example too, like say there were a few packages you wanted to provide from EPEL or some other repository like that. You could include just those specific packages and not provide access to everything else in EPEL. So you can really get really granular control over what you're making available to be installed on systems in your environment. It's really, really cool.
Yeah. Speaking of like EOS, like I think we're gonna do a quick EOS for RHEL 8 here, just so I can kind of show you the content view portion, since we're at the end and we've got a little bit of time here. But a common thing is like your production servers, like we talked about, they're gonna have a much more stable set of packages, and doing that is as adding your EOS repositories. Let's just say here. So real quick, we'll do on the live here. And of course, I always got to up this to like 50 because I can't see anything. Let's see here. Tick, tick, tick. Okay. Where is... All right, we're going to do... let's say I wanted 8.6 for EOS. So I choose the base OS for 8.6. And I'm looking for the app stream for it. No, that's 8.6. Here's the app stream for 8.6. Okay, great. So we've got the app stream, we've got the base OS, and we want to put this to our production environment. So we've got those two repositories. We're going to add those repositories to this content view that we just created. And we want to push this to all the systems that are registered in the production or super production lifecycle environment. So you can see that they're added. Now we're going to publish it. So we publish it, and like I said, when we publish it, it doesn't mean that the systems are going to get that yet. It just means it's kind of available for use here. We've got to promote it also to that environment. Now I'm going to kind of do an oopsie here and go directly to prod, and it's going to tell you it's out of order. Oops, not that prod, this prod. There we go. It's going to tell you it's out of order, but I'm going to promote this, and anything that's registered using this activation key is going to get these new channels. And so we're going to do a finish, and it's going to hopefully click away pretty quick.
So as this is running, I mean, clearly we've barely scratched the surface today. And there's just so much more to talk about, and there's so many tangents and rabbit holes we could go down. So I know we've got an upcoming episode here in a few months I think another TAM actually came and suggested some ideas for demos for satellite. So I'm excited for that, and of course a mini series coming up. I believe Mr. Richard Rios is hanging out with us in the chat. He'll be co-hosting that with me. So there's just so much to do, and in fact, I'm kind of thinking this might be. Having a mini series might actually be the excuse I need to finally rebuild my broken satellite server here in my home lab.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there's just a ton. And when we just talk about the patching component of it, I mean, we say it's just patching, right? But there's so much to it, especially for people that maybe aren't in the industry or maybe don't do it on a regular basis. They think it's you just apply the patches. Well, no, not really. And there's a lot more to it. And inevitably, the application team is going to be like, I can't have this package in here, even though it's on 8.8 or 8.9. I cannot have it be deployed to the system because there's a problem with it, and you got to come in there, and you don't have to just add repositories to content views. You can create a filter, and the only change to that content view is the filter, for that version, and you publish that new version to the environment, and you can do that. So let's get our activation key now that we've got this thing all created, and create a new activation key, and we're going to do activation key prod EUS, and we're going to do super prod content view. Here's a content view that we just created, and there we go. Now I will do this, and I think you can still run this after, if you've already registered the box once, it's going to have the necessary things. So you can technically still run the subscription manager register because it's going to have your RHSM configuration configured for it. So you don't have to do the register content if you've been messing around with systems or they're already registered. But this is, my bad. I guess it's not. Never mind. Let me see here. Register host. Okay. We're going to do this again real quick here. And register the system, insecure, advanced. And, well, you know what? We'll do this just because it's going to be the last one here. Activation key. Prod EUS. There we go. Generate. Copy this in. Making sure I'm on the right terminal this time because I accidentally ran this on my laptop, which was fun to fix. All right. You can kind of see here as we're running that, it's actually looking for that old Catello CA consumer package to mark for removal. But it's going to go through the exact same process, except this time it's also going to register for insights automatically and set that up, which is really, really nice. Before you would have to, here it runs, is, oops, let me see here. Looks like I borked something. Classic way to end a demo, right, guys? Let's see here. Okay, there we go. So SuperProd is the environment name that it's on, and then you can see that content view that it got established. And then assuming we have this working correctly, we will see. Oops, you know what, guys? I think I made the mistake, the classic mistake of not overriding it in the activation key. You think that's what I did? I totally missed doing that. See, look at that. You do it enough live, and you make the same mistake that you just told your viewers. Heads up, you may run into this.
So what you're saying is that was built into the demo.
Yes. Oh, you know what? You've done this before, haven't you, Eric? That's really good cover. See, I'm not versed in COIA here, right? But yeah, I just made that mistake, right? For your guys' benefit, is the enable override, which is why it wasn't getting it. So yeah, and then I think we can just do a refresh, right, guys? Oops. Nope. Do I have to run the registration command again? Yeah. Nothing like a good old force that doesn't fix things, right, gentlemen?
You never know what you're going to get when you run a live stream. So you kind of learn certain things you can do to like audience is getting bonus content here. I mean,
yes. I mean,
this is how you troubleshoot satellite issues. You just
I don't
didn't know
know.
you were getting it.
Yeah, I didn't. You guys don't know how lucky you are, I suppose, right? But here we can see the repos. So now we're basically getting the RHEL 8 EOS for 8.6. So for your production environment, so you can kind of see, we create different content views for different environments in your lifecycle paths based on the stage that they're in. And as we've kind of alluded to this entire time, we spent an hour and we've scratched 5% of the surface of satellite and patching in general, and the things that you can do and the trouble that you can get in. So I'm hoping this kind of gives an enlightenment to how to use a satellite, at least to get started with it and get you playing with it and toying with it and seeing all the things that it can do.
Awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate the walkthrough. This was more of a guided tour than any specific type of workflows. So here in a couple months, we'll have an episode around satellite, and that will probably be our kickoff for the miniseries. I forget who we've got lined up as a guest for that episode. I've got like 6 other projects in my brain right now, so apologies there. But keep an eye out on our YouTube channel for that episode coming up. Speaking of events coming up, we mentioned Satellite 6.15 is now GA, RHEL 9.4 is now GA. We mentioned that 8.10 will be out in the next week or so. I forget exactly when that's due, but it'll be coming out here in the very, very near future. So keep an eye out on Red Hat's website or on social media to know when that drops. Also, go ahead and click on the QR code to join the Discord link. I think like 5 or 6 more people joined during the episode live. So definitely a growing community, people just asking questions, just hanging out and chatting after the episode. In fact, what I'm hoping to do is once Summit is over and I actually have a full night's sleep again, my hope is to have post-episode hangouts. So we'll jump off the air. We'll jump over to Discord. We'll start up a video room and just kind of hang out and chat. Maybe some additional content. Maybe get some questions answered, or just generally hang out and shoot the breeze. So really excited to see how that community will grow. Of course, you can also find us all over the internet, things like Twitter, LinkedIn, Reddit. We've got a growing presence on the Red Hat subreddit. So plenty of places to get engaged with Red Hat Enterprise Linux and folks like Pete, who is a TAM, technical account manager. I believe last year, probably, we had an episode about a day in the life of a TAM. So go and check that. Links and additional information will be available in the show notes. So coming up. Closing thought. Coming up, we have Red Hat Summit next week. Brian and I will be there along with dozens of our closest Red Hat friends. So if you're there, be sure to drop by the RHEL booth. There'll be swag, there'll be demo stations, there'll be some chances to hang out, a lot of special events. Red Hat Summit was one of the highlights of the year. It's one of those things, Brian. I don't know about you, Pete, but it's one of those things that I always dread leading up to it, especially like in this particular moment, because all of a sudden I have like 2 or 3 more presentations that I didn't know about until Friday. So it's just like
we
I'm
don't
exhausted, but that flight out there kind of resets, and it's a great time.
Yeah, I wish I could join you guys. That'd be great. We don't get the opportunity as TAMs to go out that often. There's a lot of Red Hat people. I know when we have a large contingent of our customers that come, some of us TAMs do get to go, or if we present. But when I have gotten to go to Summit, I mean, it's great. I love that week. It's just awesome. So many great people, so much information, great speeches and topics, things to learn. It's just awesome.
And of course, there'll be tons of RHEL focused content, a lot of stuff around Red Hat Insights as well. In fact, there is at least one, if not two, satellite labs at Summit. So if you're going to Summit and you want to learn more about satellite, try and sign up for one of those labs. They do fill up quickly, so make sure to RSVP to one of those sessions as quickly as possible. As far as live streams, obviously, all of the live streaming team will be traveling next week for Summit. So there will be no episode a week from Friday of Into the Terminal, and then we'll be taking a week off from this show, and we should be having an episode 2 weeks from today. We went ahead and canceled that, just trying to come back home and recover from Summit. We didn't want to try and put together an episode and have it be subpar just from exhaustion or lack of planning or whatnot. So Brian and I are going to take a week off, and then we'll be back at it here in a few weeks. I don't have a topic lined up yet, but there are so many announcements coming at Red Hat Summit that I'm really excited to. We've got episodes and guests lined up to talk about some of those new features. So really a lot to be excited about. So definitely hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. That way you get that way it shows up in your feed regularly, and hit that bell so you get notified whenever we go live. We've got the RHEL product update coming up a week after next. It's Tuesday morning US time, so make sure to join that. I'll be giving a presentation on RHEL 9.4 and new features, and there'll be a lot of us hanging out and chat. So plenty of opportunity to ask questions about 9.4 and some of the new features there. Brian, I feel like I'm forgetting anything. I feel like I'm forgetting something, or maybe everything.
No, I think you covered it all. Thanks so much, Pete, for being our guest today.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks, guys, for having me.
Yeah, this was a great time, and I learned a few things about satellite getting prepared for this episode. So definitely appreciate you coming along. Tell your TAM friends that we're always looking for new content, new topics, and
Certainly
new people to embarrass on air as their demos explode.
Oh, you guys were nice.
And we've all been there. All right, folks. Thank you all for joining us, and really appreciate you joining us in chat. And for those of you that are watching after the fact, please use the comments. We check it every day or every 2 days, and we try to answer your questions. I know Scott McBrien is usually answering questions before I even get logged into YouTube for the day. So plenty of opportunities to interact with us. Thank you all very much. And on behalf of our guest, Pete, Brian Smith, and the entire Red Hat Enterprise Linux team, thank you all very much. And if we don't see you at Summit, we'll see you in a few weeks.